Tim Miller, it was in the Bulwark, it was in your publication. Say more about this provocative piece about what should happen tonight around just the truth, the facts.
Yeah, look, I think that what Jonathan was doing was definitely being provocative, but he's pointing to interviews that have actually happened with George Stephanopoulos, where he did this well. We can think of Jonathan Swan during COVID interviewing Trump has done this well. And look, it is a different scenario. Dealing with Trump is different. I agree with David that Joe Biden needs to be up for the job that he expects he's going to get, which is probably not a big assist from the moderators. But that said, no, we've not had a presidential debate before where one of the people on the stage tried to attempt a coup and continues to lie about whether we have elections in this country that are fair and free, and continues to lie about whether our Justice Department is fair or whether it's biased. Like this is the first time we have somebody like this. I think Donald Trump's been on these debate stages before, but we can now add to his just repeated, mendacious, obnoxious lying the fact that these things have happened. January 6th has happened. He's been convicted as a criminal, and he's going to lie, as you said in the intro, about both of these critical events. And so, okay, don't the moderators have some responsibility to hold him to account on that? Joe Biden also does, but so do the moderators. And there's going to be a balance in how to deal with that.
These conversations are uncomfortable. The moderators are two of the best in the business. They both are friends of mine. But how was the first question not who won the 2020 election?
Is that to me? That should be the first question.
Yeah.
That should be the first question. And by the way, if it's not the first question, and look, I'm a failed debate coach, so take my debate advice with a grain of
You
salt.
and me
But having coached several candidates who failed against Donald Trump, so I trust Joe Biden. But man, if that's not the first question, it should be pretty, in the first 30 minutes, something that Joe Biden interjects into the debate. Just especially if it starts to get rowdy, looking over at him and be like, "You realize I beat you, right? Have you yet to admit that you've lost? You didn't show up to the inauguration. You sicked a mob on the Capitol. Capitol Police died because of your lie. Are you ready to admit now that you lost?" I assume that Jake and Dana will get to that, but if not, Joe Biden's got to do it.
I mean, Claire, I guess what keeps me up at night is everything that they need to know about both these men is out there, right? Their concern about Joe Biden is around. It's not just his age, because it's about how he carries his age. It's a question about the delivery. He's someone who's had a lifelong stutter. It seems to have caught up with him in year 4 of the presidency, right? It's something that people view him as halting. But they're open to being wrong. And you look at the reaction in the Democratic coalition after the State of the Union. Oh, my God, where'd that guy come from? There's a lot of hand-wringing. That is something that's in the DNA of the Democratic Party and the Democratic coalition. It isn't in the Republican Party. Obviously, they nominated Trump 3 times. I want to ask you what our role is as we talk about this debate. A lot of people are going to watch this. This could be sort of an NFL football-sized audience. There's also going to be the people that consume the things that people say about it. You tell me the frame that should go around tonight's debate.
I think in a perfect world, I would love the frame to be darkness versus light. Listen, Donald Trump is appealing to a lot of people in this country that are just mad. They feel like they haven't been given a fair shot. And he is speaking to them in a way that no other politician has ever spoken to them. He says things he shouldn't say. That gives them some kind of sense that he's on their side. They're wrong about that. He's not on their side. He's busy promising tax cuts to big corporations and promising the billionaires that he gets them and has them and will take care of them. But they believe that. So I really think that what this should be is, overall, if you look at it from a distance, one is going to talk about how terrible the country is, how awful everything is, how America sucks, how everything is rigged. And the other one is going to talk about our ideals and be aspirational and be about the light that America can be to the rest of the world. I think that contrast can get some of those folks that haven't tuned in yet. The guy that's a jerk and impolite, and the guy who loves his family and really cares deeply about America. And yes, he's old, but you know what? He's lived a lot of years and knows a lot of stuff and gotten a lot done, and he cares about keeping our democracy strong. that could win over those people who haven't been paying attention. And mark my words, there will be people watch tonight that haven't paid attention at all, that still are not sure who's responsible for Dobbs and Roe being overturned.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.